Generic greetings and welcome to Science Insanity, a podcast show thing dedicated to bringing my love of science fiction and everything turbo nerd to you, along with my lovable sidekick slash recording slave Steve slash basement gremlin. Say hello, Steve.
Hello.
Before we start, huge thanks to all the people who gave this channel a chance. We put a lot of effort into this stuff, or at least I do, and it's really nice to see people enjoy and support it. Thank you very much, it's awesome. Now, go watch the rest of my content if you haven't. It has been decreed, you don't have an option. But today, for now, first, we're going to be talking about the Mercury-class Battlestar. Not the biggest canon Battlestar in Battlestar Galactica, not the newest or the most famous, or in my opinion, even the coolest looking, but goddamn, this ship is the embodiment of Gigadick energy. If you need a ship that can not only scare the pants brown on whoever it's facing, but confidently beat his and his buddy's ass at the same time, look no further than the Mercury class, baby. This thing is fantastic and I love it. Originally, this was going to be on the Jupiter class, the Galactica, in fact, and the flagship of the entire universe, since, you know, it's in the name. But as I was doing research, I realized that, no, actually, the Mercury is just more fun to talk about, so we're going to be talking about that today instead. And just look at this thing. I sent Steve an image, which is just it's glorious. I love it. It's greatest design ever. Peak Battlestar design. So, for a brief synopsis of what we're covering, we're going to go over the history and development of the ship briefly, the technical specifications. We're going to look at the different production runs of it, 0, 1, and 2, which are all basically iterations on each other. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's not going to be a super long episode because we're not covering the entirety of a science fiction universe this time, just laser focusing in on one really, really cool ship. So, you excited, Steve?
I am, indeed. Can't wait to learn about this beauty.
Oh, the number of fucking things that we are going to talk. Oh, it's so good. I wrote the script and I was having so much fun the whole time. So, let's start with the history, shall we? The Mercury-class battleship was first designed and built about 20 years after the first Cylon War. Not the second one, not the nukes raining from the sky war, the first one when the Cylons rebelled. The Mercury was designed with a new colonial mindset after the signing of the armistice with the Cylons. So, you know, after the First War came to a conclusion, or a pause, I guess, and a Cold War began, the colonials were like, yeah, we should probably update some of our fleet, because by that point, you know, the Jupiter class was great, don't get me wrong, but the rest of the colonial fleet was basically hunker-junkers that were flying around on basically the last fumes they had in the tank and desperately hoping not to get blown out of the sky. So a massive rearmament and repair program, or refit program, was done to get the colonial fleet up and running, and the Mercury class was the pinnacle, the center point of this rearmament. During the Cylon Rebellion, the goddamn toasters stole literally everything, right? These ass-grabbing robots not only turned your pacemaker off, but they were absolutely determined to steal everything that wasn't bolted down. Basically, imagine what happens if you leave a sports car left unlocked in the downtown core of Detroit, and that's what the Cylons did to literally everything that they could get their hands on. Didn't even have the courtesy to leave it up on blocks. They stole the cinder blocks as well.
That's pretty good.
It's a pretty good analogy for what they did, yeah. Oh. So the 12 colonies focused primarily on creating ships like the Jupiter class initially during the war because they were really large, heavy-hitting battle carriers that were simple and easy to produce and didn't require super complex systems. A lot of them, in fact, you'll notice like with the Jupiter, there's like exposed ribs and superstructure on the ship because they didn't have time to make it look pretty and fully finish it. They just needed to get these big suckers out and ready to go to fight a war of extermination. And, you know, that was great at the time, but like I said, it was mostly due to resource issues and shortages, especially because when the Cylons left, they took, you know, the entirety of the unskilled labor pool with them. However, you know, after the colonials began rebuilding their shipyards, stabilizing their industry, getting their manpower under control and everything, and they had the time and, more importantly, the peace to actually begin doing that, they decided, no, we are not going to simply make an evolution of the Jupiter class, larger, heavier, and better in every way, even though that's what the Mercury was. we're going to make something that is fundamentally different and fundamentally superior to the entire tactical doctrine of the Jupiter. Because a sledgehammer works, but a rocket-powered laser sledgehammer is simply better. So with more... Simply better. So with more resources came bigger ambitions. The Mercury was to be the center point of the colonial fleet, as I said, designed to operate alone or in large fleets, close to resupply or years away, and flexible and effective enough in every environment that it was basically the Swiss Army knife of battleships. To this end, the Mercury was designed to be compatible with every new advancement the Colonials had, as well as the frame being designed to be upgraded or refit should requirements or technology advance. Basically imagine like modern day cruisers, the missile ones, that are designed to be, test beds and stuff. Like you can put like the US's fancy railgun or whatever the shit it is on that. You can switch out the missiles, you can change around a whole bunch of stuff, or even install new electronics suites. It's kind of like that. They're future-proofing the design. So by the time it was finished, the Mercury class would become a symbol of the modern colonial navy. Flexible, powerful, advanced, able to take whatever the Cylons could throw at it, and god damn did it look good wherever it went. When this sucker entered a room, all eyes were on it. Just, fabulous. The first few Mercury-class vessels also became the flagships of whatever fleet's assignment that they were sent on, because they were also fitted out with extremely advanced command and control systems, and were also designed to basically be the flagship of whatever fleet they were on, along with, all the facilities for that. They also came equipped with super advanced electronic systems. Kind of getting up to the point where you shouldn't be at anymore against AI, where they're starting to network shit and starting to be able to coordinate other ships purely electronically. They're kind of pushing the boundary there a little bit against the sentient machines, but, I'm sure it couldn't come back to bite them horribly in the future.
No way. None of that ever happened. It's all just hearsay.
Nah. The last episode that we spent like an hour talking about, and the entire television show, that's purely in-universe fanfiction. Never happened. Humanity's perfectly fine and kicking, yeah. 40,000 people? That's just a shiner. Walk it off, kid. You'll be fine. So let's move on to the technical specifications, shall we? We're going to talk about all of the fancy things that they threw onto this sucker and all of its stats, because boy is it entertaining. By the way, do you understand metric, Steve? Am I going to have to get like a 2 American calculator for like distances and sizes and stuff?
I was an engineer, so I understand some metrics.
Okay, do you understand?
I understand metrics, yeah.
Oh, okay, that's all right, thank God. We will start with the crew and computer shenanigans, because despite being way larger than the old Jupiter-class Battlestars, the Mercury actually requires significantly less crew, like 50% less crew, even when they're fully staffed, a little under 3,000 personnel to be at full crew capacity. And that may sound like a lot, but we're going to get into some scale here, right? Keep in mind, the Battlestar Galactica could have anywhere from like 4,000 to 5,000 personnel, depending on what they're carrying and whether or not they're bringing Marines and ground forces with them, right? And that 3,000, that's everything for the Mercury. Fully loaded, baby. Yeah, so like I was saying, 3,000 personnel to be fully staffed, and it only needed a couple hundred if it was running on skeleton crew. Like, imagine a modern-day US aircraft carrier with only like 200 people crewing the entire thing. It's absolutely ridiculous for a ship of its scale. And the reason for this was because the Mercury, unlike the older Jupiter, had way more advanced computer systems and was far more automated, that was capable of basically running most of the ship's functions purely automatically and remotely. The big boy could potentially be operated by literally one person. Assuming you needed no fighter support or damage control or anti-boarding parties, you could theoretically captain this absolute chonker of a ship with a single dude in the captain's chair. And that was because the computer was capable of doing everything from managing airlocks, fire suppression, ammunition, reload, and feed issues, to targeting, to maneuverability, to pretty much anything. You could even coordinate where you want the flak screen to be, and the computer would just handle it. So assuming you didn't need to worry about the ship taking damage, one dude could take this thing for a joyride, which is just the greatest thing ever. I can't explain how much I love that, because like in the modern day, one person with a really advanced weapon system can do a lot of damage. Like, we've seen that in the Ukraine war, right? Modern American planes as well are absolutely insane with the amount of crap one guy in that plane can do. So, thousands of years in the future, when people are flying around in literally city block sized spaceships, it's not particularly unbelievable that one person could potentially be crewing it. Now, this is also utter insanity, science insanity. I wrote that joke into the script because I couldn't find anywhere else to put it. Please laugh, Steve.
One per episode, baby.
every time we're gonna fit one in every time. We have to. It's too cringe to let it go. Like I was saying though, since the Mercury class is over 1,600 meters long, over 1.5 kilometers long, and one dude can control this thing, it is fantastic. They literally have a little tram system running the length of this ship so people can get from one end to another. That's how goddamn big it is.
But do they have a singular corridor across the length of the ship that a warthog can run down? That's the real question.
We're talking. It's also around 600 meters wide and 300 meters tall at their biggest. And it needs to be because the amount of stuff they crammed into it. And let's move on to the armor and guns, because that's what makes the Colonial special. That's the secret sauce, baby. And we'll quickly start with the armor since it's easier and there's not as much information. The Mercury, it's a brick shithouse. It is like the tankiest thing ever. This sucker has even more armor than the Jupiter class. Remember, Steve, do you remember how we talked about the Jupiter could eat nukes to the forehead and keep on trucking? Meters of armor, right? The Mercury is even stronger. It is described as being either equivalent to the Jupiter or in many places, specifically along the prow, being almost double the armor thickness and effectiveness of the Jupiter class. So,
is that good, or?
Yeah, the Jupiter can face tank nukes. What do you think the Mercury can do if it's twice as tanky?
I think it can handle at least a small caliber handgun round.
I have no idea. I have never fired a gun in my life. What's the handgun? Is that the mythical AR-15 that everyone keeps trying to ban?
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll go with that one.
Yeah, never been to the shooting range with my cousin 2 or 3 times a month. So the armor on the Mercury is absolutely bonkers. It is just incredibly tanky. It's also described as being rated to withstand direct nuclear strikes multiple times. So those Cylon nuclear missiles, right, the anti-capital ones, the Mercury was designed so that it could soak multiple of them on the armored prow in almost the same impact location and still going. It's like eating 2 or 3 of them to the face and it's still capable of fighting. That's how beefy they made this stupid thing. It's absolutely ridiculous. And we're kind of getting into the point in sci-fi where you're just like, I don't believe what you're telling me, but my mind can't believe it, but my heart absolutely does.
Why it's sci-fi, man. You gotta actually believe it.
Science
Some
fiction.
Advanced material.
Another thing.
Some would say insanity.
Oh God, no!
We're getting to it now.
there's 2 in the video now. You have to laugh twice as hard in the comments. There's no choice. Yeah, the other huge difference with the armor between the Jupiter and the Mercury class is that the Jupiter was built during a time where resources were really sparse and they had to get these ships out quick. So in a lot of cases, it was like an all or nothing armor scheme. They would plate up all of the, Citadel, the ammunition magazines, the launch bays and stuff, all of that. Like the CIC and the armored prow, but they would leave a lot of segments unarmored. Like, for example, the rear of the Jupiter class in between the engines was completely unarmored, right? A lot of the different areas where they mounted point defenses on the Jupiter, they just didn't put any armor there. They were like, well, instead of making custom armor plates to go around the guns, we're just going to cut a big strip in the armor and then put the guns there like a big row, right? That's not what happened with the Mercury. The Mercury is fully armored. The whole thing, the entire thing is covered in that silky smooth, polished armor. Not a single square inch of that sucker that could be armored was left unarmored. Excellent. Not to mention that the increase in plating also means that the Mercury is functionally immune to smaller weapons like the standard missiles of Cylon fighters and their autoguns and stuff.
I don't know, man. I think one might be able to get through.
I don't know. I mean, the Mercury is the literal definition of "my face is my shield" as they just run screaming into a fight. This absolute chonker, by the way, moving on to the guns. This absolute chonker has 30 double-barreled kinetic kill weapons. Those big-ass cannons that we talked about in the last episode, the ones that we said were, about the size of firing a train car. It's got 60, it has 60 barrels ready to go. That's like double the effective guns of the Jupiter, unless we're talking about it's way overstaffed, like way overgunned refit.
I'm not sure that's enough, if I'm being honest.
Oh, it's got more. It's got so many more.
Okay.
Don't worry. Do not worry.
Okay. I'm
Now,
still worried, but...
Unlike the Jupiter class that had most of its weapons mounted on the top and bottom, the Mercury goes, no, we're going back to naval broadsides. It has most of its weapons mounted on the front nose section and the prow of the ship, as well as down the sides and along the flight pods. If you actually look at the ship, oh, there we go. That's actually excellent.
Jeopardy music for duration?
No, it's fine. We got it. We're real quick. There we go. So
Okay.
When you look at that image, right, you see the trench that goes between the upper and lower part of the prow, as well as like the sides of the flight pods and stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's where all of the guns on the Mercury are, as well as that slit that runs down the top of the head, right? You can see that in there as well. There is a shitload of guns all in there. And the reason they designed it like that is because almost, and I do literally mean almost, the entirety of the Mercury's gun complement can fire directly forward, which is just the greatest design principle ever. I paid for these guns, so I'm going to use these guns. It's so good. Now, the other thing to talk about, in terms of artillery, we got more stuff like missiles and point defense to go over, but in terms of artillery, it also has 8 super heavy cannons mounted in the prow. I believe we briefly talked about this in the last video, and if we didn't, you're going to get to have so much fun with this, because they're so big, you cannot aim them. You have to physically aim the ship to aim the guns. That's how big they are. They are the size of smaller ships in this universe. Shuttles and stuff, they're about as big as that, and they run the entire length of the prow almost back into the middle section. They are the main artillery of the Mercury class, and they are capable of annihilating Cylon base stars with only a couple of hits. The regular guns may be firing train cars. These things are firing the entire goddamn train.
Bruh. Okay. It's modern day S-tanks.
They're so good. Like, it's such a stupid fucking thing. It's amazing. The Mercury also has an assload of point defense weapons. So many, in fact, nobody ever gave a number to it. The best description that I managed to find was that, and I quote, "The Mercury class has the most numerous point defense and interception weapon suite in the entire colonial navy, only surpassed by the Nova-class Battlestar, the design successor and replacement of the Mercury class." So everything we talked about with the Jupiter, right? Thousands of guns making up the point defense system. Double it, and then we got the Mercury, baby. Let's
double it and give it to the next person.
Double it and give it to the next person. In fact, I have a better way to describe it, okay? The point defense weapons, the point defense weapons on the Mercury are like a Texan's basement. How many guns does it have? The answer is yes. It also has a shedload of missiles, but the numbers are all over the place depending on the sources. It's kind of the problem with Battlestar Galactica that there's so little of it out there that nobody really sat down to hammer out a ton of really concrete values, right? But we do know some hard facts about it.
Some, of course, like cold hard facts, not sponsored, by the way.
Oh my god, that hashtag not sponsored joke is gonna keep going forever. Every single time we bring up a brand name, we have to. All right. Regardless, though, okay, it has anywhere from, and keep it. I'll explain. This is a huge variance, but I'll explain. Anywhere from as little as 10 missile tubes mounted on the back dorsal section, so basically the top where the guns used to be on the Jupiter class, or all the way up to several hundred missile tubes. And it It varies drastically. Every source seems to give me a different number on this. However, after kind of cross-referencing it with other designs, here's what I have come to. The Mercury has about, 10, maybe more, main anti-capital missile tubes mounted on the top. These are the big fuckers that fire the nuclear ICBMs, the planet crackers, right? These really big one-and-done missiles. And then it has hundreds of interceptor missiles along with the point defense weapons. These are things that can shoot down Cylon raiders, blow up larger incoming missiles, and generally just add to the defense of the Mercury class. And the reason I think that's the case is because a lot of the source material often describes the Mercury as using interceptor missiles or shooting down other Cylon craft using its missiles. And it would make absolutely no sense, although it would be really fucking cool.
It would be pretty funny.
It would be pretty funny if the Mercury decided that it was going to shoot down some fighter crafts with a nuke. I think that would be awesome, but it is what it is. So again, though,
we don't have the resources for that one, though.
Yeah, not quite. Come on, man, if you did have the resources, you mean to tell me you wouldn't be firing nukes like someone fires a machine gun?
That's what I'm saying. I don't think they have the resources for that one.
Yeah, so, there's no way. But, like I said, there's no hard numbers, right? So feel free to go as ham as you want. My mind tells me that my assessment is right, but my heart is telling me that the Mercury has several hundred building-sized nuclear missile silos in it, and it gives me a warm feeling inside thinking of it. And I choose to believe the reason they never unleashed the apocalypse on the Cylons is because they just didn't have the missiles for it.
That is now our canon. That is canon on this series.
That's our canon, right? It's only like 1.5 kilometers long, but it still manages to fit in enough nukes to wipe out all life on Earth several times over. God bless the Mercury class, he says, saluting dramatically behind his monitor. And speaking of hundreds of things rocketing out into space, fighter complements in the air group. So, unlike the last part, we actually have super concrete numbers for this. And I want to start by preempting the comments section. The Battlestar Pegasus, the Mercury class we see in the television show, only escaped the Cylons because it was in dock with its computer systems disabled and it was undergoing refit and rearmament. I'm not talking to you, Steve, I'm talking to the other turbo nerds that know what I'm mentioning, and I'm preempting their gotcha moment. So, everything from its crew to fighter complement were under-equipped, undergoing repair, resupply, and stuff like that, and that's why we don't see it vomiting out fighters in the show. There's also a bunch of stuff that we never see in the show, like the Pegasus losing half of its fighter complement in a conflict with the Cylons and stuff. So in the actual show, it's super stripped down to be about at the same flight readiness as the Galactica, right? In actual full wartime readiness, though, as was planned, the Mercury carries 10 squadrons of Vipers, which are like interceptor light fighter craft, in case I didn't explain it to you before, Steve, and 50 Raptors, which are heavy fighters, bomber, fire support platforms, that kind of thing, right? Each squadron of Vipers is between 24 to 30 craft, depending on the model, at least from what I've found, and since the Mercury carries pretty much only the most modern Vipers, the Mark 7, it launches squadrons of 24. At peak power, the Mercury has around 240 Vipers and 50 Raptors it can vomit out, give or take. And I mean like projectile puking like a fire hose across the Mexican restaurant level of vomit right here, okay?
Damn, not the Mexican restaurant.
No, it's always the Mexican restaurant. That's like the only place. No. I take it back. Mexican is great. Mexican is absolutely fantastic. It's like shitty North American knockoff Mexican, like, Taco Bell, that I walk in and immediately blow my guts out. I don't even eat anything. I just walk in and the air causes me to immediately contract.
It's something in the air, man.
It's just, what can I say, man? There's magic in the air whenever you walk into these places.
There goes the Taco Bell sponsorship.
We didn't need them anyways. We got more. Like I was saying, though, it has 74 Viper launch tubes, which means that it can vomit out 74 Vipers in the span of about 1.5 minutes. And it only takes a few minutes to reload these things, so it can send its entire complement of strike craft and interceptor vessels out in the span of about, I don't know, give or take 10 minutes, which is insane. As for more of the structural parts of the ship, it's never shown in the show because animation is expensive, But the Mercury has a huge number of engines and RCS thrusters just all over this thing. It has 8 main engines mounted on a ring at the back, which I'm pretty sure you can see. They are very, very well defined back there. Quite a lot of junk in the trunk. Ooh, hot under the collar, man. This thing is so goddamn beautiful. I love it. But it also has a ton of other thrusters, and in fact, I think 2 other main engines on the front of the ship to burn retro. If the Mercury needs to get its disco on and schmoove the fuck out of the way of wherever it is, it can use those 2 massive engines on the front, coupled with all of the other retrograde thrusters mounted all over it, to basically turn and move in whatever way it so wants. Once again, Battlestar Galactica treating space like space. You're not a giant plane, you are a spaceship. You know what else is really, really, really fucking good about this? You want to know what's canon? It is canon that the Mercury can ship drift if it wants to. It just cuts its rear engines and it can use the RCS thrusters to turn itself. It can drift past you while shooting you with the main guns if it wants to. That's a canon thing it can do. It's so good.
Tokyo Drift.
It's the size of a fucking city and it can do that. It's so good. It's such a stupid universe and I love it so much. Also, Star Trek, step up your goddamn game, man. Your version of science fiction is just... It's so old by this point. It's so old.
Oh, it is the oldest one, so...
No, I'm pretty sure... I'm pretty sure Isaac Asimov stuff and Dune is like way older than Star Trek,
man,
isn't it?
I don't count Dune.
Why not?
I was just referring to this Star Wars and Star Trek.
Oh, okay, all right. What Dune is like one of the... Okay, you know what? We're not gonna get into it. I can't...
Hey man, you wanted me to be an idiot about this stuff, all right? I've never seen Dune, okay?
We're both... Are you kidding me? You've never seen... Okay. All right, you know what? We're gonna go back to BattleTech after this. I got it. We've got another topic we gotta... Dude, sacrilege, heresy, how... Okay. I will get you to love the Slug Emperor of Mankind if it kills me. I will not explain that statement.
What?
I will not explain that statement, okay? But you will come to love the Slug Emperor of Mankind, just like everyone else who loves Dune does. To anyone that knows Dune in the comments, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's pretty much everything we need to cover with the Mercury. The only other thing, briefly touching on it, is like the computer systems. The only other notable thing is they're extremely networked and extremely powerful. Without being sabotaged by the Cylons, the Mercury's computer systems were designed to be able to withstand Cylon hacking for hours in an actual combat scenario, while still maintaining a lot of the benefit of having partially networked systems and stuff. For now, let's quickly talk about the Block 0, 1, and 2 models, like the production runs of it. Okay. The Mercury class is actually 3 different refits, which are separate enough to kind of be considered different ships, but they're all lumped together into one class, even though the refits are like drastically different from each other. The first one, the Block 0 Mercuries, were mostly what we've been describing up until now, except for having way less networked computers and not really much else going on. They were basically a test bed, making sure that the frame, engine, FTL, jump drive and stuff, everything was working. It was basically the shakedown model, where any problems were going to be ironed out and anything more advanced would be added in later once they made sure nothing was going wrong with it. The Block 1 Mercury were the first major production run that was mass produced, and they were the most numerous version of the Mercury Battlestar. They received several redesigns and upgrades, like having the stacked flight pods sloped backwards. So in those images that we posted, you'll notice that the flight pods slope back at the front and rear of it. They didn't used to do that. The Block 0 model, the first production run, that was just a flat front, and it really got in the way of the gunfire angles for most of the guns, so they ended up cutting them back. And it was also when even more point defense weapons were added on, and a few more main guns were tacked on to the flight pods at the front and back as well. And this is also, along with those networked computers, where they got real good electronic warfare and firewall systems. They finally got NordVPN. Okay, I'm sorry.
Not sponsored, by the way.
Not sponsored. It has to be done every time. I can't help it. Every time cybersecurity comes up, we have to make that joke. And that's pretty much everything for the Block 1s, the main production run. The Block 2s were the second production run and were a further refit of the Block 1 design. Rather than improvement or massive redesign like what happened between the 0 and the 1 model, the Colonials got way more advanced and began to, once more, experiment with fully linked computer systems and autonomous control of their battleships. So the Block 2 Mercury class would begin to incorporate massively increased computer hardware and a lot of super advanced electronic warfare suites that, at least what the Colonials intended and hoped, would be able to counter-hack and scramble Cylon raiders and smaller ships, preventing them from effectively engaging in combat. And the biggest reason for this is because this is when the Mercury became the testbed for a virtual intelligence. Now, I need to explain. The Mercury, none of them were ever equipped with a virtual intelligence. Its successor ship, the Nova Battlestar, an even bigger fuck-off ship, that actually had a virtual intelligence in it. The Mercury 2, the Block 2, was a testbed for it.
When are we covering the Novas, by the way?
They'll come around, maybe. So you know how the Mercury is 1,600 meters long? The Nova is 2,400.
Okay. And when did they actually show up in the series? Because this is the first time hearing of them.
Here's the problem. There's a lot of extended universe stuff that only shows up in comics or like one-off movies or mentioned in the side or in books and stuff or like as concept art. And for the most part, the creator canonized all of them and has like up-to-date modern designs for all of the ships. But they just like never show up in any significant way. Like we know for a fact that there's like 14 or 15 different classes of Battlestars and like Gunstars, which are, you know, cruisers to the Battlestar's battleship. They've got like frigates and stuff. Like they have all kinds of stuff, but they just never show up, even though all of these assets were designed, and a lot of lore was made for them as well, which is criminal. So the Mercury Block 2s were designed as a testbed for virtual intelligence. And what these were fundamentally different from the Cylons. So remember how the Cylons were like a human consciousness that was stripped of all humanity and then used as a general artificial intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, a virtual intelligence is how we're trying to develop it in real life. It's like a learning network, like a big, really complicated algorithm that learns the more it has access to information. And the Colonials basically developed these to do one thing really, really well. So a virtual intelligence has no ability to adapt. It's not really alive like the Cylons are. It's just basically Cylon level effectiveness at doing one task. And it could be anything from coordinating the point defense screen so that it's almost impenetrable to being counter-hacking. So if the Cylons attempt to hack a Mercury 2, then this VI just goes absolutely not. A ludicrous increase in the ability, but the reason that the VI were even used is because they're not actually artificial intelligence. They didn't violate the ban on AI, and they couldn't be used for anything else. You could never use a VI that was supposed to be, you know, manning your guns and try to get it to somehow coordinate the landing systems for fighter craft. It would never be able to do it. They do one thing, and that's it. There is also a number of other additions that were made to the ship that simply continue to add to its absolute insanity. So, no, don't do it. Don't make the joke. Don't make the joke, Steve. Good boy. So, other stuff, right? Other stuff. Aside from simply being bigger and better in every way than the Jupiter class, the Mercury also had a bunch of quality of life additions made to it for both crew comfort and military operations. We'll start with the crew stuff first. It was really big, so it had multiple rec rooms for the crew. It had a small mini bar. It had like, you know, little exercise areas like gyms and stuff. And I think they had like a shrunken down basketball court or like a half court or something. They had a whole bunch of other stuff like that. They also had a hydroponic garden, which was added to the Mercury. It was capable of producing large amounts of fresh produce in accelerated grow beds for the crew to help supplement their rations. Fresh fruit and vegetables is always nice for morale. And aside from that, it also produced a huge amount of oxygen. So even if the life support systems went down, the Mercury would be capable of supporting its full crew complement for several days without needing any form of maintenance on the life support system. It also had extremely advanced water reclamation facilities and refining systems, meaning that the Mercury could use its Raptors to recover mineral fuel, tilium, that we talked about, because, fuel in this universe isn't like oil or whatever, or antimatter. It's like big chunky crystals that you have to refine. And it could also grab like water and stuff and heavy metals and elements that it needed for any onboard operations. Altogether, the Mercury could be self-sufficient in its entirety for up to 5 years without ever needing resupply so long as nothing broke down. And that's not just like, oh, the ship would be fine. Because, in the modern day, we have nuclear aircraft carriers and they can sail around for like thousands of years without ever needing to stop, right? I'm talking like air, food, fuel, all that stuff. The Mercury can be out there for 5 years, maybe longer if it needs to be, which is just ludicrous. Those minerals it could refine, well, it also had a massive fabrication unit mounted in between the two flight pods near the bottom of the ship, capable of manufacturing frames for, Vipers and stuff, components, weapons, and even electronics. It could essentially fabricate from scratch new Viper Mark 7s and Raptor Mark 2s, allowing the Mercury to repair, rearm, refit, or even produce ship parts and tools to replace losses to battlefield action or wear and tear. In case the Mercury needed to train new crew members, it also had a number of VR suites that the crew could use for pretty much anything from relaxation, because, VR, to training them in any necessary jobs and roles such as, fighter combat, CIC operations, maintenance and repair, and literally anything in between should the need arise to replace or retrain crew. It was fully capable of staffing, training, and producing all the equipment it needed to maintain itself, keep on running, and even rebuild its air group. So this thing was designed to be just yeeted out into space to the ass end of nowhere and be fine for pretty much the entire journey.
Just left there to die.
Yeah, literally. Like, one of the reasons they designed the Mercury class like that is because the border between the 12 colonies and the Cylons, like the demilitarized zone, was massive, and they might have needed the Mercury class to be on patrol for, upwards of a year, 2 years, whatever, at a time. And if the Mercury was going to be taking offensive action against the Cylons and invading their space, there's a good chance that it would be cut off from any resupply for quite a long time or would need to fight its way out. So being able to manufacture and repair everything it needed, huge tactical advantage, especially because it could also fabricate components for other ships. So older stuff could also be built on board and it could resupply other vessels using it. Alright, what else did we have? Oh, wow, that's fast. We're actually done. That's about it, actually.
Hey.
That's the Mercury class Battlestar. That's about it. I don't think there's anything else really to talk about. Mercury class Battlestar. This thing is an absolute beast and I love it. It is beautiful, it is built to kill, and it does that job really, really well. Anything else? Any other questions? Anything else to add?
I have nothing else to add. Nothing meaningful.
And you know what? That's that. Video's over. I hope you enjoyed it. Next time, we are going back to Battletech. We're going to be talking about how people build the mechs, how they repair them, how they maintain them on the battlefield, and why the mech bays that they deploy all over the place are really, really dumb. And with that, video's over. Thanks for watching it. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. Subscribe, watch my other stuff. Goodbye.
Bye.